interesting. Well, hospital porters, pride and dignity, stop the New World Order. Welcome. And thanks for having me this evening. Really, thank you all of you for coming out on this lovely evening when I'm sure you'd much rather be at home having a barbecue in this lovely weather. Thanks to Dave for inviting me here this evening. He is without a doubt the second coolest bald man in the world. The coolest, of course, is Telly Savage, who played Kojak. Who else would I be talking about? Now, are there any hospital porters in the room? I'm at the wrong meeting.
I might start as a nursery to me. It's okay.
No, that's too far away. No, I'm at that BUFOG place, aren't I? Well, I hope you'll let me stay. Yeah, well, I'm going to tell you a bit about myself. Here we go. That there is basically a panel of hospital porters against the New World Order, which is my website, which contains all the information you need to know about me, including articles, and so there's a YouTube channel and the radio shows, of course, which I do. So please do go to hpamwo.blogspot.com. But that's not the end of my lecture, don't worry. But this is me. My name is Ben Emlyn-Jones, and for a long time of my life, 23 years of my life, that was what I looked like. The portering Buddha. That's how I describe it. I was a hospital porter at the John Radcliffe Hospital in Oxford, well, it's a long story, which I've told before. I won't go into it this evening, but I was kicked out of my job in very suspicious circumstances. Well, basically, it's very, very difficult to prove, but there's no doubt. I mean, it's a long story, but I think the reason I was kicked out is connected to my activities and what I do, like I'm talking to you this evening. There was a concocted case against me. But not to worry, I've left that behind me really. I'm now happy in my life at the moment. So that's the main thing. Still carrying on, they haven't stopped me. So this, I'm going to talk to you tonight. The title of this lecture is Energy, Politics and UFOs. And you might think, well, what possibly could there be a connection between those? All will be revealed. So UFO, well, this is the definitive UFO image. The flying saucer, the classic saucer, which I'm sure you're all familiar with. UFOs, none of you, I'm sure you know that they are unidentified flying objects and what that means. That basically simply means an object which is flying, which you don't know what it is. It could be something that you would recognise if it was closer and not up in the sky, where it's so far away and so distorted by the atmosphere, something like an aircraft or a kite or a bird or anything like that, or a weather balloon or a lighthouse or a truckload of burning manure being driven by a parachute test dummy, of course. But I mean, my sarcasm, I think, is valid because not all of them are those things. Some of the things, if you've got close to them, indeed people have seen them close, they've had these close encounters, are definitely things that are not normally seen in this world. Now, along with this classic image you see before you here, there are many other types of UFOs. In fact, they come in all shapes and sizes. This is a photo taken in 1990 in Belgium, and it shows a black triangular-shaped UFO with lights on it. Now, this is another very, very common form. Dave is going to talk later on about one that's been seen right here in this city, Birmingham. They're seen often in the North Country of England at the moment, to this very day, but hundreds of them, I think, were seen over Belgium in the late 80s and early 90s, and some of them were photographed, and this is one of the best photographs. So the black triangle is another common UFO shape. And spherical ones as well, ones which are shaped like a ball, round objects. I've seen one of these myself, and I'll be explaining in a moment my own sighting. This one was seen in 1979 in a place called Livingston in Scotland, and it's by a guy called Robert Taylor. And this was seen very close to the ground. It was actually hovering just above the ground, and he was as close to this object as you guys are to me. And indeed, this object attacked him. He grabbed hold of his trousers, or it sent small objects. There were small copies of itself came out and grabbed his trousers and ripped his trousers. And I've seen that pair of trousers. And I put my fingers through the holes and the rips that were made in the trousers. Amazing. But that's another common form you get, which is the circular spherical UFO. This here is an artist's impression of a pyramidal or tetrahedral UFO, which is shaped like a pyramid or tetrahedron. And this one was seen in what Dave has already mentioned, probably one of the most significant UFO sightings in history, which took place in 1980, in December, at Rendlesham Forest in Suffolk. Gary Heseltine has been studying that very, very closely indeed. I'm sure most of you have heard of this. The reason it's one of the most significant sightings is the quality of the evidence, the eyewitness testimony, and the credibility of those eyewitnesses, the number of them and the quality of it. But it really is a remarkable case indeed. So that is the Rendlesham Forest tetrahedral UFO. Another one which you sometimes see, these chevron-shaped craft. They're usually black, and they sometimes have lights on them. This is similar to the one that was seen in 1997 over Phoenix, Arizona in the United States. This was a huge object that flew over Phoenix. Phoenix is a city of about 1 million people, same as Birmingham. So it's a city of a similar size. Thousands of people reported seeing this object, and it was filmed, and there was film of it broadcast in the news. It's probably not the best film that was taken of it. This is a huge object which is reported to be many hundreds of yards across. So that's another form. So it does recur occasionally. And there are lots of other types which, they do strange things and they look strange, and they come in all shapes and sizes, as I said. There's some irregular shaped ones, and they sometimes do weird things. Either that or weather balloons are being fitted with bull bars. Now, I describe these things as I describe these things when I describe them, I use the word artifact, because I think to say spacecraft is a little bit presumptive. I think it may be more complicated than simply being spacecraft, and I'll come on to that in a minute. But the reason people will use that term, I mean, it's actually a valid hypothesis in many ways, because it does seem that these objects, these artifacts, are some kind of transportation for biological creatures. Dr. John Mack, we've just been hearing about, he studied this very, very closely about the witnesses to these biological entities. This is one of the most common beings reported. It is many, many people have encountered this creature, even in our environment, or sometimes they are taken on board these artifacts, and where they meet creatures like this. And there are many, many other types. Well, as with the objects themselves, there are many, many different types of being seen on board them. This is another type. It looks slightly more human, but if you passed it in the street, you would give it a second look, even if it was wearing normal clothes. This is another common species that I've seen. Where they come from, what they are, I don't know, but they're not from round here. This creature was seen by the author Whitley Strieber. He used to write other types of novels, but he actually went and wrote books about his experiences after he encountered this being. When he was several times during the course of his life, and several other members of his family did as well. And it's a very, very fascinating story. If you read the book Communion or seen the film, definitely worth watching. Definitely worth reading. This is the creature known as, this goes by several names. It's known as the reptoid, or has several other names. It's often reported with unpleasant experiences. This creature is quite regularly seen as malevolent and unpleasant. These beings, they seem to have a wide variety of motives, and their behaviour varies enormously. Some are good, some seem to be nice, some seem to be nasty, some just seem to be disinterested and are studying this as a scientific objective. Like I said, there's no, people say, are the aliens good or bad? Well, they're all those, they're both. And everything in between. And this creature is often reported with experiences which are unpleasant, according to Mary Rodwell, who's a great Australian researcher. It's basically humanoid, but it has reptile-like features. So it's like a half human, half lizard kind of thing. This being resembles a praying mantis, which of course is an insect, but it's far bigger than any praying mantis on this planet. It's reported to be at least the size of a fully grown man, sometimes much bigger. And despite its fearsome appearance, it's actually said to be quite benevolent. It's said to be quite friendly and even loving. And for some people, it's like a spiritual guide. I do recommend Mary Rodwell actually as a great source of research in her books and her films that she's made. They're really, really interesting. So there's all kinds of weird creatures, weird, wonderful, strange beings that you couldn't imagine seeing them. What on earth is that? Have you ever seen that kind of craft? Funny thing, Nick Pope got married. Yeah, he has actually got married now. He married his fiancée Elizabeth at the UFO Congress in Arizona. Didn't go very well though at first because the vicar said, he was standing at the altar and the vicar said, "Nicholas, do you take this woman Elizabeth to be your lawful wedded wife, to love and cherish and care for her till death? Do you part?" And Nick replied, "I can neither confirm nor deny that." Now, this is my own sighting, which is on the BUFOG archives, on the research site area of the site. Basically, you can read about it there, but basically I saw a white spherical object. It wasn't next to the ground where the one in Livingston was, but it was very high in the sky and it's quite a long way away. But it was definitely something strange, and I was on the phone to my girlfriend at the time, and I was walking on the road in Oxford, and I could see this thing up in the sky. And it was a windy day, it was cold, it was the 28th of December 2008. It was windy, it was cold, quite bright with broken clouds, and it wasn't a balloon. I checked in the local press, and I checked to see if there were any balloons going on at the time. Balloon flights? No, there were none. It wasn't planet Venus, because I went to the US Navy Observatory and checked to see where Venus was at that time. It wasn't there, it wasn't that. So that remains unexplained. I don't know what it was, but it went behind a cloud, well the cloud came over because this was stationary in the sky, even though it was very sort of, even though it was kind of, well the wind was blowing, this thing was absolutely stationary in the sky. And then when the cloud passed over, it had gone. Never seen it again since. Very, very strange indeed. Now, we're going to discuss energy. And energy it's actually quite hard to define, and it does connect in with the UFO subject, as I will explain. But we need to first work out exactly what energy is. And energy is actually a very, very hard thing for even experts to describe. People like Stephen Hawking or Professor Brian Cox. Even he had trouble, I don't know. No, even he had trouble with that one, but it's basically, it's this quantity which is in the universe is basically behind any kind of dialectic within the universe. That is movement, change, energy is behind it. And we all need energy. All of us are using energy all the time. And there's different kinds of energy. There's the energy that our bodies use. My body is burning calories which come from food that I've eaten. And when I raise my arm like that in the air, it takes energy to do that. The energy in my muscles, in my body, are using energy from the food within my stomach, which I've digested, and it's converted into energy which it uses for me to do things like that. Sorry, wrong meeting again. Basically, that's the nearest you can come to describing it. Now, there's this. Now, that's one form of energy, the energy our bodies use. Now, of course, we use other forms of energy which we make ourselves from other sources. Now, as far as our civilization goes, we use energy from various places, but especially oil. Oil is the lifeblood of our civilization. It is everything around us, the modern world we've built, is dependent on this energy source. Here we see an oil rig. This oil rig is actually drilling oil out from under the seabed. which you can do in oil rigs. They're going deeper and deeper out into the sea, and I'll explain more about that in a little while. But this is an oil rig just bringing oil up from under the sea. This is a nodding donkey, which is an oil pump. Again, oil's sometimes found on land, and where it's found, you have to bring the oil drilling infrastructure to wherever it is to bring the oil up. And it needs pressure under the ground to actually squeeze the oil up. You can't actually pump it out very easily. It has to be squeezed out by pressure from within the earth. And all over the world, wherever you go, there are prospectors going looking for oil. They're looking for more oil. They're looking for ways to exploit the oil wells we already have. This here is a factory. Of course, it uses a vast amount of energy. And as I'll explain, it uses a kind of energy that this kind of energy would be unthinkable a little while, just a few generations ago. But without the oil, without coal as well, which is another fossil fuel which we use, we could not have these factories producing the kind of goods that they produce. So we need oil basically for everything, or coal, oil or coal for virtually everything. There are alternatives to that on a small scale, but these really are auxiliary, things like these wind farms, things like solar power, nuclear power, things like that. But they are very much auxiliary to the fossil fuels. So that's something you don't often think about, but the petrol you put in your car, to lighting these lights here, to shooting a rocket up into space, or switching on that screen and this projector, is dependent on this kind of energy which is burned. It comes up from the ground and we burn it. This is something quite recent in our human society. One of the guys who, is that the girl I met in the pub earlier? Hi, tell her I'll call her back later, okay? Now, there's one of the guys who's going to be central to this particular discussion is this fellow here, Richard Heinberg. He's one of the most dedicated researchers into energy and humanity. He's a journalist, he's a teacher, he's an ecologist, and he's a futurist, so he studies the future. And he's written a book called The Party's Over. Very chilling title, but actually what he is saying is, he charts the use of energy from the very earliest dawn of mankind to the present day and into the future. And he's concerned because he says oil is running out. We're about to hit peak oil, which means basically the peak of oil production on the earth is going to be reached, and then it's going to start declining. And at the same time, society is expanding. It's growing. There's more development, more modernisation all across the earth. More energy is being needed, and there's less energy to have, according to him. I don't agree with him, all right? And I'm going to come to that later. But for this part of the discussion, it's important that you see the world through Heinberg's eyes, and you understand the issues about how this affects most people, because they're going to be seeing it through Heinberg's eyes as well. And it's very, very important politically. This is what I mean by energy politics. So what Heinberg's basically saying is, excuse me, human beings have been on this earth for, no one knows exactly how long. It depends how you define human, because there were Neanderthal men before us, there was Homo erectus before us, but modern man has been on the earth estimated between 1 million years, 100,000 years. Estimates come and go. They're always finding older skeletons. But for more than 99% of that time, our only energy source was what I demonstrated earlier, our own bodies, our own muscle power, our own calorific energy taken to our muscles from food we eat. That was our only source of energy. And of course, the pyramids was built, or supposedly built, I don't agree with that, or I'm not certain. I'll be coming to that again later. But the official story says that pyramids in Egypt were built by guys basically pulling big chunks of stone by hand and putting them in place by hand. So that monumental structure was still standing today, 5,000 years after it was built, was put together completely by muscle power. But of course, sometime in the prehistoric world, in the Neolithic age most likely, or maybe even before then, we realised that some animals have more muscle power than we do. This donkey, which is this photograph was taken in Egypt, and it shows a donkey pulling a cart full of some vegetable matter. Now, if you've got some men to do that, you'd need probably 2 or 3, at least, to pull that cart along. And they wouldn't be able to pull it as far as the donkey did. The donkey has a lot more muscle power. So of course, what we did was, at some point in the past, we managed to persuade these animals to live with us and work with us. We've, I mean, I don't think you can't force them, but it's probably voluntary in most cases, but we got them to come and live with us and work with us. And the donkey is not as strong as a camel. Camel is tougher than a donkey. It's used in hot countries for basically the same thing that a donkey is, as a beast of burden. Camels have another advantage over donkeys, is in that they can survive and thrive in very, very dry conditions. So which allows, they're known as the ship of the desert. So if you live in a desert and you've got a camel, you can travel the places you could never go with a donkey. A camel can take you across the desert, you can ride on its back. If you try to walk it, you'd never make it. You'd be finished. And of course, these photographs are modern. People still use these beasts of burden in some places. This photograph was taken in South America. It shows a mule pulling a plough. Now again, it's so strong, it pulls the plough, and there's the guy guiding it standing on the plough. Again, this is something that you could get some people to do, but you probably need a dozen strong men pulling that plough to repeat what the mule does. The mule is far, far stronger, so they use the mule. And that's basically what it was from the sort of Neolithic age up until right through to the ancient world and into the Middle Ages. And then everything changed. Everything changed almost, in terms of historical time, almost overnight. The Industrial Revolution kicked in. And this is when we first started using fossil fuels. It happened basically around 200 years ago, and it sort of phased in over a number of decades, but for the first time we were given access. We suddenly had access to a fuel source which was hundreds of times more powerful, more efficient and more compact than anything we'd ever used before. I mean, we have factories we were burning coal. The Industrial Revolution was basically in 2 phases. It began, the first phase was most of the 19th century, which was coal, and the 21st and 20th century, which was oil, which I've just described. And of course, in the 21st century, we're still in the age of oil. How much longer? I don't know. But really, it changed so much, it's hard to illustrate, but Heinberg gives a good example. He says, if you want to know how much oil has changed this world, the amount of energy you now have at your disposal, get in your car, drive 30 miles from home, switch off the engine, and then push your car back. Which is, you'll realise how much more energy you have in your car than you do in your body. It's literally, it's incredible. You can drive 30 miles in probably less than an hour, depending on traffic, doing nothing more than turning a steering wheel and pressing some pedals. You have to push that car back home. Both yourself and the car home would take weeks, and you probably wouldn't be able to do it. Oil is industry. It's not just a fuel of society, it's a lubricant. It's not the biggest industry, it is industry. And as I said, the compact nature, when you fill up your car with petrol, your engine, just a few square feet, has the same amount of power as 250 Roman galley oarsmen. Your car has more energy than a Roman galley. So you have, under your bonnet, when you turn the key in ignition, 250 Ben-Hurs, all going, yeah, that's literally what it's like. Now, the downside, though, is what we're discovering now. The society, the human civilization, is unsustainable, and that's a word you hear a lot now. But it's unsustainable for several reasons. Firstly, environmental damage. As you see here, forests are being cut down as this human society expands, because it has to keep expanding because of the nature of the economy that's a part of this society we live in. It is related to fossil fuels because it's grown up alongside fossil fuels. It is the capitalist system which basically rules the world. It is inherited the earth over the last 200 years. So there's more people who need more energy. There's always more energy. And we have a finite world. It won't go on forever. And of course there is peak oil, which Heinberg has studied, the peak in oil production. Now, are you familiar with Ian R. Crane? Has he spoken here? Has Ian spoken here? No, Ian R. Crane is a former oil company executive who was a researcher into these various subjects. And he doesn't believe in peak oil. He thinks it's a myth that's concocted to basically as a way of control, which I'm going to talk more about control later on. He says things like oil is actually abiotic, which means it's not a fossil fuel. And if you leave an oil field untouched for about 10 years and go back, you'll find that the oil well has pressure again. And the Russians have been doing this for years, but they don't tell anyone, because if it ever came out that oil was a renewable resource, the price would go through the floor. And a lot of energy politics is about maintaining the price. So it's important that we see oil. It's perceived as a fossil fuel. It's perceived as something that will hit a peak of production and then go down, because that's when the price can be maintained. I don't know if Ian's right there. He might be. But really, whether he's right or not, for the purposes of this discussion, we'll have to just assume for the moment that it is true there is a peak oil. All right? And Heinberg's right and Ian's wrong. Okay, so what's being done about it? Well, there's the easy to reach oil is running out. So petroleum providers are moving out further and further out to sea with deep water oil rigs, far deeper than the one I showed you at the beginning. This is Deepwater Horizon oil rig, or it was. Of course, it suffered a terrible disaster in 2010, which was either an accident or design, depending on your point of view. Ian says it was designed, maybe he's right. But however it happened, the Deepwater Horizon oil rig was destroyed, and the Gulf of Mexico is still feeling the punch of that. It's still picking up the pieces from that disaster in terms of pollution. It will be for years and maybe centuries to come. But when you get out to deep water, when these oil wells go, it's very, very difficult to shut them off. And of course, another solution to the lack of easy-to-access oil is fracking. This is very much in the news at the moment. There's a big protest at Barton Moss and Bolcombe and places like that where they are testing fracking. There's a very advanced test going on at the Fylde Peninsula in Lancashire, not far from St Anne's, if you've ever been to the Probe conference on New Horizons. Fracking is a way of extracting natural gas from the earth, which you wouldn't be able to extract any other way because the gas is trapped in little bubbles and not large porous lumps of rock. So when you sink a well down, nothing comes out. So what they're doing with hydraulic fracturing, as it's called, is they're injecting very high pressure water into the well, mixed with chemicals, which they won't tell us what they are. This literally breaks the rock apart and releases the gas into the well, and it can be extracted. The problem is it also releases the gas into the environment. This is very, very deep, but the gas does make its way up, and it gets into the soil, it gets into the air we breathe, it gets into the water that we drink. And this is causing health problems for people around areas where they're fracking. And what's all the chemicals do as well. We still don't know what's in these chemicals because they're not obliged to tell us, apparently. Now, Ian R. Crane says again that this is actually being done deliberately to create environmental catastrophe. And he may well be right there, and I'm going to talk more about this because the environment and energy politics is linked. It's very, very important. One place I differ with Ian on is Ian is suggesting that we just move fracking offshore into the sea. I think he's being a bit too cautious there. I think he should go the whole hog and bring up the subjects that I'm going to bring up this evening. Another very destructive way of extracting oil is tar sands. Now this looks disgusting, doesn't it? It's actually very huge. You can see like a road going along there. This is a tar sands pit in Canada. Tar sands are basically sands filled with tar, hence the name, and they've been mining them in these huge quarries. The problem is that they smell, they're dirty, they're dangerous. They release the toxic chemicals, the petroleum into the environment. Birds land on them, and they get sick, they get ill, and they die because they get poisoned. Now, the result of all this, whether it's fabricated or whether it's a real piece of oil, is the price of energy is rising. All kinds of energy is rising. Because we're not just talking about oil here, we're talking about electricity, because electricity has to be generated by fossil fuel burning mostly. Is there anybody in this room whose energy bills have not risen in the last few years? Didn't think so. Is there anyone in this room who drives a car who's noticed the petrol prices going up at the pumps? Anybody? No? I didn't think so either. The price is rising. Either it's being manipulated or it's happening because of the natural scarcity of the product, but it is rising. Electricity runs through the national grid. And this is another problem with this energy system. Acres and acres of countryside has to be churned up to build power stations and power lines which make up the national grid. The national grid is effectively a series of giant electrical circuits that cover the entire country that provide power. All the power we're using today for these lights and this computer and this projector come from the national grid. These circuits are charged at various places along their in various places along the grid, so that the power is maintained. You get a current and voltage on the lines. It's wasteful, and some people say it's harmful. It is harmful to the environment, when you have to, like I say, make room for these facilities. These power lines have been linked with childhood cancers. They've been linked with environmental damage. It's a pretty much a bit of a mess. It's a really difficult situation, and there's people like Heinberg are talking about a zero growth economy and deindustrialization to avoid these problems, to avoid the environmental problems and the danger. And we've just been hearing on the news about a mining disaster in Turkey. Over 200 people are dead, and there's going to be more. They haven't dug up all the bodies yet. Mining is still one of the most dangerous things in the world. Mining, fossil fuels take up a massive amount of man-hours. It costs money to drill for oil, it costs money to dig coal. It's not just the price of the fuel, it's the price of delivering it to the consumer, and the danger of things like mining. This is what Heinberg is talking about: deindustrialization, a zero growth economy, and a complete transformation in society to take account of this lack of energy. Now, there's something very sinister about this. I don't think Heinberg means any harm, but these words have a subtext which mean trouble for everyone here, and I'll explain why, and I'll explain why there's an alternative to what's going on, what's happening in this world. Now, Heinberg describes the world as he sees it in terms of energy with a graph, with a series of graphs. We have here, I drew this myself. This is a copy of one of Heinberg's graphs, mate, more or less, simplified, which I've done. It's very, very simple. Along the horizontal axis, I plot time. It's just arbitrary. There's no actual units. I've just labelled the present day in the middle, future to the right, and past to the left. On the vertical axis, I've just plotted. It's a way of measuring quantity. Quantity, again, there's no units. It's just an arbitrary qualitative measure of quantity. As you can see here, the blue line represents population, the red line represents energy consumption. Now, like I said before, for 99+% of human history and prehistory, our population, there were literally no more than a few 100 million people in the world. And that remains steady for many, many thousands of years, even hundreds of thousands of years, with small variations. And as you can see, our energy production was also very low as well, because as Heimberg has explained, the only energy we had was muscle power, as I said, or the calorific power of food, which our body uses for energy. It's really, really strange, but even through the Middle Ages, we still had less than 1 billion people in the world. The population of the Earth only passed 1 billion in about 1800, and about 2 billion in, I think, the early 20th century. It's now 7.5 billion. We're adding billions on almost every decade now. Now, as Heimberg has plotted, at the start of the Industrial Revolution, there was a massive, massive increase in energy production with access to those fossil fuels I told you about. And you see the energy shoot up, our energy production and energy use shot up. And at the same time, our population did, proportionally. A lot of the figures I'm going to show you on these graphs match each other exactly. So there's no doubt that our access to energy and the civilization, the modernisation of the world, industrialisation, resulted in a massive increase in the number of people in the world. Now, in the past, as you see here, we have the population and energy graph back in the past at a low level. High up there, you see a green line, which is resources. Resources, which basically mean everything. Fuel, of course. The fossil fuels fossil fuels were created millions of years ago, billions of years ago even, by ancient life which decayed. But also things such as wood, forests, topsoil, biomass, which is animals and plants. And also fish, fisheries, food, and water. Water is a resource. Now all these things, a lot of these things are renewable, and they had no trouble being renewed because there were so few people in the world using so little of it. So the resources remained at a very high level, and they never really altered. Humanity never really impacted on them at all. But as Heimberg has shown, when we hit the Industrial Revolution, production went up, energy went up, population went up. Those resources started to be used up, and they started being used up at a rate faster than they could be replenished, even if they were replenishable and they were renewable. So the amount of resources in the world is dropping. The grey line, as you see there, the grey line there is environmental damage. And as you can see, in the past, it was low. It was very, very low indeed. And along with the population and energy production being low, the resources were right up here. Environmental damage was very low. We were having very little, if any, impact on the Earth. And of course, the environmental damage starts going up in proportion with the rising population and energy production. As the resources decline, the energy production goes up. Now, this is where we are in the present day. What does the future hold? That's the question. Now, Heimberg, like I say, he has a pessimistic side to himself and an optimistic side to himself. He talks about deindustrialisation, the changes in society, so we're not using all this oil as it runs out, as he sees it. But he fears that this process will continue. It will continue. Environmental damage will increase as energy and population rise while the resources are being eaten up by this rising tide of humans consuming. And he compares us to yeast. He's a bit of a misanthrope, actually, this guy. He really is. He wouldn't be very good dinner party conversation. You know, you go over feeling really miserable. And he says basically, humans are like yeast. When you put yeast into a vat to make an alcoholic drink, you put yeast in, you put sugar in. Right? The yeast gobbles up the sugar until there's no sugar left, and it's converted it all to alcohol, and then the yeast dies. And Heimberg says, are humans more intelligent than yeast? So on the pessimistic front, this is how he sees them. Sorry, I don't know what that's doing there. Sorry, Yeah, so what can be done? That's it, sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself. What can be done? Now, the alternatives, wind and solar power. That is also, this is something that's been, I've discussed before, I'm sure you've heard about it. They talk about renewable, sustainable energy production. But I think everyone realises that you can't actually replace fossil fuels with that. You can't get as much energy out of these things as you can out of fossil fuel. And there's disadvantages to things like wind power because the turbines, they harm wildlife, they hurt birds and bats and things like that. And they also have very high overheads. They have a very small, they're very inefficient. Things like solar power can't, you put solar power in your house, it helps, but you can't have your whole house solar power. I know other people don't always agree with that, but interestingly, you have to charge the national grid with your solar panel. You can't disconnect from the national grid. But there's also nuclear fission power, which is of course nuclear power. When you hear the word nuclear power, that actually means nuclear fission. This is where you take heavy metals, uranium, and various isotopes of uranium, and you split the atomic nuclei, which then give off, because these are unstable, these materials, you give off energy and heat, and also a lot of ionising radiation, which is why it has to be, nuclear power has these hazards associated with it. And again, this is why nuclear power is unpopular and it's worrying, because of things like Fukushima and Chernobyl, and it just shows you what can happen when things go wrong with nuclear power. And what's more, nuclear power is not going to last us for much longer because uranium is not going to last. The uranium loads of the world are limited, and they're going to run out within 25 years. If we switch over to nuclear power, they'll be gone within 25 years. And what's more, what will be left over is nuclear waste. Even if we have no disasters and damages with the nuclear power station, no Fukushimas, no wind scales, still we have this nuclear waste to deal with. We have to bury it underground in huge vaults. It will remain dangerous for over 500,000 years. Who can tell what could happen between now and then? What disasters could occur? And you get this distinct impression, there's a comedian called Robert Newman, who is, despite being very ignorant and having ideas like Heinberg's, which I think are dangerous, and I'll explain why, I can almost forgive him because he's quite funny. He's very, very funny. And he dresses up as the devil and he goes, "There's no way out." And you do get this sense of desperation from the environmental movement. I mean, there's guys, people in like the Green Party and Greenpeace and ecologists, people who used to be dead against nuclear power are now turning to nuclear power as an alternative. A lot of it's associated with carbon dioxide, or carbon as it's been rebranded. Whether or not you agree that carbon is dangerous or not, whether it really is causing climate change, the fact of the matter is people think it is. One of those, of course, is George Monbiot, who actually has the entire Guardian newspaper to play with, so he reaches an audience of millions and millions that we could never reach. You heard of him? George Monbiot, or as Alex Jones calls him, Lord Monbiot! That spindly little twit! Not a man, but a monster! I actually think Alex has been a bit hard on him there, but I think he's very destructive. I think like Heinberg though, I think he believes a lie, and that's why he's doing this. And these people are being used by the system which I'm going to be talking about. You see, there's another solution, and another proposed solution, which is nuclear fusion power. Have you heard of nuclear fusion power? You have, yeah. It's
called How to Make a Star.
Yeah, it is basically, it harnesses the power of stars and planets, because what it does is, it's nuclear power, but it's a very different kind. Unlike conventional nuclear power stations, which split atoms of heavy metal, this fuses atomic nuclei together of something called deuterium. And deuterium is extremely common. You don't have to mine it, it's actually in water. In fact, in this glass of orange squash, it's probably about maybe 0.5 milligram of deuterium. Perfectly harmless, of course. Otherwise, I'll be dead. Yeah, so you can get deuterium out of water very easily. And what you do is you fuse the nuclei of this deuterium together at very, very hot temperatures, it has this device called a tokamak, which is a vessel which is surrounded by, which has a magnetic field, and this hot gas is contained in the magnetic field. It has to be contained in the magnetic field because it's so hot. It's about 100 million degrees. So it's so hot that you can't actually hold it in a solid object. And this gives off even more energy than nuclear fission. So, and actually the laboratory which is actually researching this is centred, the biggest laboratory, most important one, is actually not far from where I live, at Culloch in Oxfordshire. And you can actually go and visit it. I've been on tour and I've visited it and I've seen these tokamaks. Not an operation, but I've seen them and I've had them explained how they work. But the problem with nuclear fusion is that even though they know it works, the engineering problems are so hard to overcome that it's going to take a long, long time to get them online. They've been working on it for 50 years. It'll probably be another 50 years before usable power is extracted, even though they're currently building a new research laboratory in the south of France called ITER. And that's going to take it on another further. It's still looking at many, many decades ahead before we can use nuclear fusion power. And again, the Laurent Monbiots and the Richard Heinbergs and the Robert Newmans of this world, it's not good enough. It's too soon. It's too late. Too little, too late, they say. So, where will we go from here? Well, this is the pessimistic graph. I'll be telling you the optimistic bit in part 2. But the pessimistic graph says that basically energy consumption will continue to rise with environmental damage and pollution until it reaches a point where all the resources are gone, and then the energy production will drop off because energy production cannot be produced anymore. And all the resources will be gone of all kinds, so there'll be no food either. And then, of course, because population is proportional to energy production, population will then drop. And this has become known as the fall. The collapse, Armageddon, apocalypse, the fall of civilization. And the environmental movements, they're not just the guys with beards anymore that go out and row their boats in front of whaling ships. They're very, very different. They are power brokers. They have secret meetings in secret boardrooms and they wear suits. And they are terrified about this. And some people in the environmental movement, Heinberg is actually quite moderate. He's quite moderate compared to a few. There are people, there's a guy called Soren Renner who basically says he's a self-confessed eco-fascist. And he says Leviathan will eat itself. And he says things like, he actually quotes a Finnish environmentalist called Pentti Linko, but he says, he compares it to the sinking of a ship. The ship goes down and there are 200 people swimming in the water. There's only one lifeboat, it holds 10 people. If the haters of life are the 10 people in the lifeboat who hold their hands out to the others and try and pull them aboard, knowing that they'll sink the lifeboat. The lovers of life are those who are willing to take the ship's axe and hack at the hands on the gunwales. Yep, it's pretty grim. It's a pretty grim situation. And, sorry. One moment, ladies and gentlemen. And this is a question, and we're in a position now where there's people, very, very powerful people, probably more than who will admit, probably some will speak openly about it, like Renner. Bill Gates is quite vocal too, but there are probably more powerful people who are saying things quietly behind the scenes. You can see it as a subtext in when they talk about carbon reduction and renewable resources, a subtext of despair. What's happening is that this fall is being used as a sense of future shock. It is a thing in the future to fear which everyone is focused on in order to be emotive to create a new kind of human society. A society in which will be unrecognisable to the one we have now. one in which there are no countries, it's just one single world government, and it's an authoritarian world government. You don't get to vote for anybody, you don't get to choose anybody to elect you. You are ruled by people who just dictate to you. We're talking about a completely controlled and planned economy and a completely nationalised industry in which everything will be, again, controlled by the government. It will be planned, it will be rationed out by the government. And individual people will have no rights. Individual people in this society will simply be there to work. And you will be given food to you. You won't buy it, you won't receive wages, you will be given your food to help you work. And when you're no longer of any use to this society, you will be killed because you will become a useless eater. And that is a quote. That is a quote from several people. It's been attributed to Henry Kissinger, although he's a useless eater himself. He's the biggest useless eater on the planet. It's funny how these people who talk about depopulation and reducing the world's population, you know, they never offer to go first, do they? You don't see Bill Gates on Beachy Head saying, I'm going to set a good example. Come on, Bill, jump off that, or shoot yourself, or suck an exhaust pipe. Don't practice what you preach, mate. No, they never do. It's always somebody else, isn't it? But in this nightmarish future society, like I said, it will be basically it's saying that this fall will justify it. You cannot protect the earth and protect humanity from this fall while maintaining liberal democratic piety. So we need this authoritarian world government to save the planet. And if you don't support it, you don't care about the planet dying. How long have I gone now? What's the time?
About 45 minutes.
Have I been going 45 minutes? Well, shall I leave you on that cheerful note? And we will continue later, because there is a happy ending to this story, so please do stick around. Alright, so I'll be back in about 20 minutes. Thank you very much. That's it. Alright, sure. Well, thanks again for coming, and it's great you're here. And bye-bye, thank you for coming. See ya. So some people left. And thank you everyone who's watching at home on Panmo TV as well. It's really, really great you're here. Now, again, as I've been explaining, we have a situation where everyone is dreading, in politics around the world, dreading this collapse of civilization, this fall. All right, and what's more, as I said, this is a grim subject. I think that it's not just being planned. I think there are measures already being carried out which involve a change. It's already been done secretly. Now, for example, you don't get blue skies anymore. You get white skies covered with these chemtrails. I think there are powerful people who have already decided that action has to be taken, and they're not going to try and do it publicly through Parliament. They're going to do it secretly. They consider we, the people, too decadent to ever allow these things to be done openly. So they're doing it in secret. The true purpose of chemtrails, I'm not sure. It may be connected with climate change and geoengineering. There are geoengineering research units now in many universities and other institutions around the country, including the Oxford Martin School, which is contracted to many corporations and governments. You even get a degree in geoengineering now. But the aim seems to be, I mean, it could be on one level people think it's about geoengineering, but it could also be about a geoengineering on a level which involves the changes in the biological makeup of life on Earth and even the Earth itself. At a very, very fundamental level. I don't know how many of you are familiar with Sophia Smallstorm and what she discovered about the connection between chemtrails and Morgellons disease, where people find small fibres inside their bodies. And in this nightmarish future I told you about, the New World Order, which is planned to save the Earth, we will not be eating the kind of foods your grandparents ate. We'll be eating foods that are 100% processed genetically modified and designed for one purpose alone, to keep us alive so we can work. That would be their only purpose.
It's probably already happening.
Yeah,
Finder's crispy pancakes, need I say one?
exactly. I mean, this is so they're all some, like I said, as with the chemtrails.
Broccoli's not tasting as good
No.
as it used to.
As with the chemtrails, of course, I mean, this is openly done. Genetically modifying processed foods are now very, very much in vogue, and many people are eating them, unless you have to deliberately make an effort to avoid them now. So, as the late great Robert Anton Wilson once said, on a planet that increasingly resembles one huge maximum security prison, the only intelligent choice to make is to plan a jailbreak. So how do we do that? How do we plan our jailbreak? Well, what if I was to tell you, I want to adapt Soren Renner's analogy, which he quotes Pentelinculus. The ship goes down, people are in the lifeboat, there's one lifeboat, 200 people in the water, 10 people in the lifeboat, and all these other social Darwinist nightmarish scenarios associated with it. Well, what if I were to tell you we were actually in a situation where the ship is not going down, but we've been told it is? The captain of the ship has told everyone on board the ship is going down to get everyone into the lifeboat and into the water and getting axes and hacking hands on gunwales. If we believe him, then we're going to end up in our lifeboat with our axes with our axes. And unfortunately, will there be no other reason we were in that lifeboat than we were tricked into it? What I'm saying is we're dealing with a phony war here. We're dealing with a situation that is a fraud. Everything that Heinberg talks about, everything that George Monbiot wants to bring nuclear power in to avoid, is a construct. The truth of the matter is, we don't need to be using fossil fuels at all. Fossil fuels themselves are extremely primitive compared to other energy sources that we have invented and discovered. There is an answer to all this. There always has been from the beginning. It's possible to extract energy from the very fabric of space itself. Energy, you can to extract it safely, cleanly, without pollution or any environmental damage, completely freely, and in infinite amounts. It is possible, and it even exists in nature. Some animals and plants use it. It can be found in some types of weather conditions. Now, of course, if you ask most scientists, they'll say this is impossible, because what I'm talking about breaks the laws of physics. The laws of physics were worked out long, long ago, which basically these are the laws, for instance, entropy, the laws of thermodynamics, and the laws of the conservation of energy. These were worked out long, long ago, and they basically say that the amount of energy and heat in the universe was injected in at the moment of the Big Bang, and that's it, there's no more, it's fixed. It's a fixed amount that was added to the universe at that moment, and the entire history of the universe since the Big Bang has been basically this energy spreading out and diffusing, becoming thinner, cooler, and more widespread. But never anymore. However, even mainstream physics now recognises there is such a thing as zero-point energy. This is energy that exists in space, which is present even when there is no thermal energy. So if you cool something down to absolute zero, so there's no thermal energy at all, there's still zero-point energy left. Even the scientists will admit it. But what they say is, you can't access that energy. It's there, but you can't get to it. People used to say that about the atom before Einstein came along. So you're going to be saying to me now, you're now going to be expecting me to put up a new news story that's just emerged saying that this energy has just been discovered. No, 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 no. This energy was discovered long, long ago. In fact, if you want to trace a beginning to the discovery of free energy, you have to go back into the 19th century, the first phase of the Industrial Revolution, when coal was the primary fossil fuel we were using, not oil. And the first example I want to give you of this technology was one of the earliest. And I think in future generations, school children are going to be smirking in their science lessons. Because I'm going to discuss a guy called George Pigott. Because you see, he found a way of levitating his balls. Bear with me. The next slide is not what you think it's going to be. George Pigott invented something called the space telegraphy machine, which he patented. He applied for a patent in 1903. It was granted in 1911. It's quite a simple device which involves generating electric current through that electrode in the middle, and it causes those two steel balls to lose some of their weight. What I mean by weight is the force we exert on the Earth, which is caused by us being attracted in a gravitational field. This should be impossible, but it's part of what's called electrogravitics, which means electricity used in certain conditions in electrical transmission, in terms of a circuit, a current, or interference patterns, can result in reducing the gravitational force on certain objects or certain areas. That should be impossible, according to physics. But it's been done. It was done more than 100 years ago. This is a more recent example from the 1990s in Tampere University, Finland. Here we have a ring of magnets which is rotated at extremely high speed. Above it is suspended a 1 stone weight. And these magnets spinning at high speed actually created an anti-gravity field, for want of a better word, which is a bit sci-fi, I know, but it's the best way of describing it. It reduced the weight of that block above it by 4.5 ounces, which should be impossible, according to the current laws of physics. No discussion of free energy is possible without mentioning Nikola Tesla. This guy is absolutely central to the first phase of free energy invention. He's an accredited pioneer of electrical engineering and science in the mainstream, but his true legacy is far greater than the mainstream recognises. Nikola Tesla was born in 1856 in Serbia, and he emigrated to the United States in 1884 without any income whatsoever. But he was such a genius, he very, very quickly found a living he became a kind of pop scientist. He became a household name. And he invented the electrical system we're using today, which is in terms of alternating current. He actually invented that. And what's more, the way that magnetic power is measured is called a Tesla. The unit of measurement is a Tesla. Now, something very, very strange happened a few years ago in my hospital. A magnetic resonance imager was delivered, a new one. These are huge machines, they cost about £5 million each, and it was installed in my hospital. I don't know if any of you have ever had an MRI scan. They're used quite often now, yeah. They're very, very common alternative to X-ray. But anyway, I asked, the radiographer was gushing over his new toy while he was fiddling with it, and he said, this is a 3.5T magnet. It's one of the most powerful magnets in the world. And I said to him, what does T stand for? And he says, I don't know. We just measure magnetic power in terms of T, how many T's they are. Milli-T's or micro-T's. And I said, see, I knew the answer. T stands for Tesla, but he didn't. And he's a radiographer who's been through all the training, and he didn't know that T stood for Tesla, or he'd forgotten it. And I wonder why that is. It's strange because it's not like his name is Teslarovsky or something like that, which would need an abbreviation. His name is simply Tesla. It's a 2-syllable word, easy to pronounce. So why didn't he say it was 3.5 Teslas? This is just one small part of what I think is an attempt to write Nikola Tesla out of society. What Nikola Tesla discovered was that when he was designing his electrical appliances and electrical systems, was that electricity is extremely easy to generate. You don't need to actually generate it. You can extract it from the electrical field of the Earth. Our Earth has an electromagnetic field which contains enough power to run every appliance on Earth 100 times over. And getting hold of it is extremely easy, it costs nothing. Tesla, a lot of Tesla's papers are still classified, including experiments he did over 100 years ago. In 1899, he did an experiment in California in which he put an electrode in, he raised an electrode up into the air, and he managed to get a usable current off simply the electricity in the air. That paper is still declassified. Nikola Tesla was helped by several people, some genuinely, some not so genuinely. J.P. Morgan helped him, or said he was going to help him. He got involved with him and invested in his company and tried to said he was going to develop his technology. The thing is, all he did was J.P. Morgan manoeuvred Tesla into a position where he could ruin him. Morgan wanted Tesla shut down because Morgan didn't want anyone using electricity he couldn't generate. He wanted to generate electricity, then charge people for it, like they are today. Tesla was going to give his power as a gift to the world. But J.P. Morgan doesn't do gifts. If he can't put a meter on it, he doesn't want it, and he'll make sure none of us have it. Well, there have been others as well. I mean, there's people like John Keeley, he was another early pioneer, but there's been some more recent, including Bruce De Palma, who's the brother of the famous film director Brian De Palma. He invented something called the N machine. Thomas Townsend Brown developed anti-gravity. And most famously today, John Hutchison. This is John Hutchison. He's probably the best known person today who's working with this in this field. And Andrew Johnson has spoken here, hasn't he? I don't know how many of you knew when Andrew Johnson spoke, but Andrew Johnson works very closely with this man and is doing an awful lot to promote his work. So, I'll be bringing up more about John Hutchison later. This guy here is Edward Leedskalnin. Now, Edward Leedskalnin is a very interesting chap. He is from Latvia originally, but he emigrated to the United States in the early 20th century. And in 1920, he started building a remarkable structure. He built something called Coral Castle, which, as its name suggests, is a castle-like building made out of coral. It's made out of very hard, heavy coral rock. He built it as a kind of memorial to a lost love. He was heartbroken, you see. He had a very, very acrimonious split-up with his fiancée, a young lady called Agnes Tufts. And he basically couldn't get over it. And he built Coral Castle. Thanks for coming. Bye-bye. He built Coral Castle almost as a kind of like a way of trying to express his feelings. That's not really relevant. What's relevant is the fact that he built it single-handed. And he built it, no one knows exactly how he did it. He worked at night and he worked alone. He managed to maneuver huge chunks of hard, heavy coral rock into position to build this castle. And really, it was a big mystery. But when he died in the 1950s sometimes, people went into his library and they looked through all the books he had, because they were trying to work out how the hell did he do it. He didn't use any heavy machinery. He did it on his own. He didn't have anyone else helping him. He had some books about ancient Egypt. Now he said he had written that he had solved the mystery of how the Egyptians built the pyramids. We were talking about the pyramids earlier, about how Richard Heinberg was saying they were dragged by guys, you're pulling it along by muscle power. And of course that is the official story, but Leedskalnin says no. He believed the Egyptians had found a way to basically create anti-gravity. They found a way of generating anti-gravity to basically maneuver these stones by levitating them into the air, reducing the gravitational field on them and moving them that way. And it's so precisely built. The door of Coral Castle was originally, it's a revolving door, and when Leedskalnin first put it in, it was so finely well balanced that a child could push it open, even though it weighed about 4 tons. What happened was some later owners, after Leedskalnin's death, some later owners of the castle took the door off for some reason, to do some maintenance or something, or bring something in. And when they put it back on again, they couldn't get it in just the right place. So the door now, it takes a lot more effort to push the door open. A child can't do it because they could not get it balanced the way Leeds Scotland originally had it balanced. Actually, if you ever are in Florida, please go and see it. Today it is open to the public now. It was shut for a while, but now it's reopened to the public. It's a tourist attraction. You can go in for a few dollars and walk around and see it. Please do. It's in Hale Center, which is near Miami. I do hope you can go and see it. Brilliant. And while Leeds Scowlin was busy building Coral Castle, this guy, Victor Schauberger, was watching fish swimming in rivers and learning an awful lot from them, because this guy was a forester in Austria, but he noticed something about fish. He noticed that they could move through rivers sometimes if the conditions were right without flapping their fins. So what he discovered was that fish, some species of fish, use a free energy propulsion system to propel themselves along. They use their gills to create vortexes in the water, or vortices, which he called implosion vortices. And when this happens, free energy is extracted from water itself, and it propels the fish along. And this makes perfect sense. I was telling you earlier that free energy exists in nature, and it makes sense that life has evolved to take advantage of all the other laws of physics. If free energy exists, it makes sense that life would evolve to take advantage of free energy. And I'm going to come back to that point later as well. Schauberger built several devices, including what he called the trout turbine, which were based on his ideas about water, about extracting free energy from water. He also built some log flumes. Now, in 1938, the Nazis annexed Austria, and they basically offered him a job. Well, they didn't offer him. They said, "Victor, do you want a job?" Well, he said yes. You can't say no to the Nazis. They would have ruined him if they didn't kill him. So he ended up working for the Nazis against his will. Now, this is very interesting, because the Nazis classified his work immediately, but when the Nazi regime fell in 1945 at the end of World War II, the victorious Allies seized all the Nazi technology, which is far, far more than even we've been told. The Nazis were decades ahead of the rest of the world. We know they had things like missiles and doodlebugs, which are cruise missiles, things that we never had. But that's just the start of it. They were developing high technology, and they were using Schauberger's work along with other people's. There's things like the Bell and the Beehive in Wenceslas mine. The Allies kept this classified. They didn't publicise it. They took all the classified Nazi material, papers, prototypes, and personnel, and took them back to their homelands. Werner von Braun, the rocket scientist, he was one of these people from Operation Paperclip. But there were many, many others. These guys ended up working in Britain, in the United States, in the Soviet Union, sometimes under different identities. And this technology was continued to develop in secret. Now, what's interesting is, the basis of Schauberger's work is that energy can be extracted from water. There's free energy in very, very simple things. You don't need a large hadron collider for free energy. You don't need a grinning, smiling Professor Brian Cox pontificating at you. It's present in nature. It's present in the most simple systems. Sometimes the most simple engineering can extract it. Schauberger's trap turbo is extremely simple. It's basically a spiral-shaped tube, which was very, very carefully designed to be in its proportions. And have you ever been to a house or a place where there's bad plumbing, and you turn on the tap or you flush a toilet, and you get this growling sound, you ever get that? It's really noisy. It can shake the entire building. That's called the water hammer effect. And sometimes, in some conditions, it's a free energy reaction in your very own home. Remarkable stuff.
That's right, I remember a poltergeist case where it turned out that there was an airlock in a sewage pipe underneath the street that shut the whole building.
Yeah, that could well have been free energy being extracted by the water using Schauberger's discoveries. Yeah. And these two guys are very interesting. We're coming forward in time now, because these two guys were involved in a situation in which the cover-up of free energy almost failed. We came that far from the cover-up failing. This is Martin Fleischmann and Stanley Pons. They're two scientists who discovered something that was called cold fusion. They actually rediscovered something that was actually first noticed in 1926, only then it was called the anomalous heat effect. The decision to call it cold fusion was actually not theirs. Now, Andrew Johnson has spoken about whose decision it actually was to call it that and why. And I'll let you look Andrew Johnson up, he'll explain. I can't go into it now, but basically, what happened was when these guys went public, there was a massive, massive damage limitation reaction from the system to try and shut down their information. What they discovered with cold fusion is basically it's very, very simple. In fact, it's no Large Hadron Collider. It's schoolboy science. It's electrolysis, something you've probably all done in your science classes at school. I did. Basic. They had a test tube of deuterium, that substance again, which they inserted a palladium cathode into, and they ran an electric current through it, and they suddenly realised that it was giving off so much heat, much more heat than it should have done if it was a chemical reaction. And it was all over the news. Everyone was thrilling. Cold fusion, free energy has been discovered. Finally been discovered, which is a joke. Of course, it hasn't finally been discovered. It's always been there. But anyway, they were saying free energy. We finally got it. And lots and lots of other scientists around the world rushed to try and repeat the experiment, to replicate it, to see if it worked. And well, then the story came out. No, the scientists cannot replicate it. It doesn't work. Pons and Fleischmann cocked up. It was all a big mistake. We're so sorry. Go back to sleep. EastEnders is on next. That's basically what happened, and we never heard. The cover-up didn't fail. The cover-up got into place. But next time it might not. But it's interesting to see that cover-up. The cover-up is not perfect, and sometimes it does loosen its grip occasionally, and it lets its guard down, and that's when we have a chance. But anyway, basically you've got to think about what this means, and you actually have to sit back and contemplate the implications of what we're talking about here. You've got to imagine the kind of world we could have lived in if Tesla and Piggott and all the others if their work had been publicised and not classified. We'd be living in a world which would be unrecognisable compared to the one we have now. It'd be better in so many ways, it's almost impossible to imagine. We're talking about a situation where, just think about it, you could put a machine that is small enough to fit into a cupboard in your house, which would produce energy for your entire house forever. It's a solid state machine, no moving parts, very low maintenance, and it gives you electrical power cleanly, completely safely, and for as much as you want. And it costs no more fuel bills, no more one worry about how you're going to pay the electric. The cost will be nothing, well, virtually nothing. It'll be pennies per year for maintenance. That's all it will cost. You have no more worry about gas bills and electric. We wouldn't have this obscenity happens most winters when the weather gets cold, not last winter because it wasn't cold, but where old people die of cold because they can't afford to heat their homes. It was this spectacle which moved Gary McKinnon to act after he saw the 2001 Disclosure Project press conference which Dr. Stephen Greer organised. He saw that, and then he saw news stories about old people dying of cold in this country, supposedly a rich developed country. And he decided that's what motivated him to hack into the Department of Defence computers to see what he could find. I'm so glad that guy's not being extradited, and he's not even going to be prosecuted for what he's done. I consider him a hero. I don't consider him a criminal at all. And we're talking about an end to poverty over the entire world. There'd be no more third world and West anymore. Everyone would be equal. Everyone would have all the energy they needed. And this would increase, in terms of the resources, the green line I showed you on Heinberg's graph, you'd have an infinite amount of food. Food could be produced so much more easily because One of the problems which would cause the fall is where's all the food going to come from? Who's going to feed this civilization? Well, with free energy, you could have basically as much food as you wanted almost. Certainly enough for the amount of people we have now, probably 10 times the population we currently have. The bioeconomic capacity of the Earth is not infinite, but it's far, far higher than it is now, and I don't believe this stuff about overpopulation. I think that's part of the con. But what you could do, you see, farming is dependent currently on fresh water availability. You need fresh water, you need rivers, you need streams, you need rain. Without those things, there's no farms, there's no food being produced. You can run a farm off, you can irrigate farmland with seawater if it is desalinated, which means it's turned into fresh water, the salt is removed. The process to do that is very easy, but it costs money because you need energy to run the machines which desalinate it. So it's not possible at the moment. With free energy, you could desalinate seawater for nothing. So there's a virtually infinite supply of water in the oceans for your farmland. And you could have farmland where it's never been before. And it wouldn't even need to be next to the sea, because using Schauberger's technology, you could pump the water wherever you needed it in the world, across land, for nothing. You could have a huge area of farmland in the middle of the Sahara Desert. You could have a huge area of farmland in the middle of the Australian outback. Be enough food for everybody. And without all this Stone Age combustion that we're using now to run our civilization, there'd be no pollution. The environment would be safe, completely safe from all damage. And a lot of the political issues associated with energy and with the civilization we have, and the economics of it, would be alleviated as well. In fact, they all would. For instance, I mean, you hear a lot at the moment about immigration. I think most people in this room now will know at least one person who's moved to Britain in the last couple of years. But most of you do, don't you? I live with 3 of these guys from Sudan. Now, one thing you've really got to realise is that don't get angry with these guys for coming here, because immigrants are only coming to this country because life is so much better here. They can make more money. They're doing exactly what we would do in their shoes. And incidentally, I think the reaction against the immigrants is part of this plan to create this authoritarian world government. So don't get angry with those guys. They're good guys. The guys I live with are here simply so they can have a better life than they would if they stayed in their own country. They're not part of some secret conspiracy to bring Sharia law into Parliament. They're not after your daughters. No, that's all a load of nonsense. They're just here to get a better life. Their own country, the Sudan, is a dust bowl. It's a wasteland. There's poverty, there's environmental destruction, there's degradation. It has been for a long time. But I did a little bit of a back-of-the-envelope calculation a few years ago now, actually, and I worked out that just 10 Maya cells are a form of free energy device that's been invented, just 10 Maya cells would transform the Sudan from a dust bowl into a land flowing with milk and honey. That country could feed all of Africa, let alone itself. And you don't need just 10 either, you could have 100, you could have 1,000, you could have 1,000,000, you could have as many as you wanted. These simple machines. If a time ever came when we did approach the bioeconomic capacity of the Earth, exceeding it, we could move to other planets, we could colonize space with this technology. Now this of course is a scenario in science fiction, but you always see people flying to other planets in rockets. Rockets are, compared to this, are extremely primitive. They are large, dangerous, wasteful. Yeah, well, noisy, wasteful devices which chug laboriously up into low Earth orbit on a mass column of their own fuel. It's not practical to colonize space using rockets. You need more sophisticated technology, which would be anti-gravity. With anti-gravity technology, you could build spacecraft which would make flying to other planets as easy as driving to Scotland. We could live wherever we wanted to. So let's go back to Heinberg's graph. this is the situation we're in. The fear that everyone's fearing the fall, but we're here now. Energy production is going up. Civilization is expanding. Environmental degradation is going up with this population and energy rise. Resources are plummeting. What's going to happen? Well, at this point, and I put it slightly in the future, free energy is disclassified. It's just a little bit in the future, as you can see. But what happens then? The population levels, and it probably will level at some point. It'll be higher than it was in the past, but it'll still be a technological civilization, but it'll be higher. It won't go on indefinitely. There's already signs that the population explosion is easing, and it's even without this declassification of free energy. Resources, look at resources, the green line. It goes to the bottom, it's almost gone, but then suddenly with the declassification of free energy, it goes up again because everything can be replenished because we're no longer stripping the planet of its resources. Proportionally, the grey line, environmental damage, goes back down to its nominal level, as it was in prehistoric times. What about energy? The red line, where's that going to go? Where am I going to write energy on this graph? You can't. There's only one place you can put the energy line on Heisenberg's graph, in this case. Infinity. As much of it there as you want, as much of it there as you need, forever. That's the kind of world, that's the kind of thing I predict. So in summary, we are in a situation where we're living with in a very pathological situation in terms of lack of resources, primitive technology of energy generation, suffering in Earth and degradation of the Earth. And it is engineered. It's a deliberately created situation because this technology has been kept from us. It's the primary way this situation is engineered. So this brings up a crucial question. Why? Why is this situation being engineered? Why don't we have free energy? Why are we not running this room, the lights in this room, and everything, all this equipment here, off free energy? Big question. Did these bankers destroy Tesla to stop his gift of free energy for all? JP Morgan, the Warburgs, the Rockefellers, first pretended to back Tesla, but effectively they were only seeking to control him. When they found out he was planning to give the world free energy as a gift, they silenced Tesla using the newspapers that they control, and many other methods as well. The thing is, what it is about is energy, the control of energy, the rationing of energy, the distribution of energy is a fundamental means of wielding power. In fact, I go to say that if you can't wield, if you can't control the energy, you have very little power left to wield. This is why they silenced Tesla. This is why they stopped him from producing his technology to the whole world. Nikola Tesla died in 1943. He was 77 years old. He didn't have a bean. He was living in a hotel room, and basically, once he paid his bills for the hotel, that was it. He had nothing left. Before the undertakers moved into his hotel room to take the body away to the funeral home for his funeral, the FBI went in, sealed off the room, and confiscated everything in it, or everything Tesla had been writing, everything he had been tinkering with, everything he'd been building. And as far as we know, those papers remain declassified to this day. Heisenberg's vision is based on fraud. All the other reactions to it from people like Monbiot and Renner, people like Newman, they are reacting in fear of a phantom menace. A phantom that has been created deliberately and put in front of us as an illusion. So who is doing it? That's the question. This is what they're doing. We know why they're doing it. Who are they? Well, there's a sort of outer party of people who I think are they're not out to build the new world order, okay? What they're doing is they're concerned for their own business. They could be the heads of oil companies, other industrialists who are dependent on the oil, and in the situation with oil and the price of oil. They just want their business to survive. And I mean, this is where I have to challenge the skeptics, because I think the skeptics have got this so wrong. If you ask a skeptic about this, and there are people like there's this guy called Eric Krieg, irritating little squid with a horrible, irritating voice, who says he goes around the world speaking out against the kind of thing I'm talking about. And he said, if any inventor came up with free energy, he would be a billionaire overnight. He would win a Nobel Prize. This can only mean that free energy does not exist. Excuse me. Naivety City. You can't, a free energy inventor cannot sell his energy. You can't sell free energy. You can't send bills to people for free energy. It will be like going up to the skipper of a sailing ship and telling him that I want to put a meter on his mast, attached to an anemometer, which is a device which measures wind speed, and you tell him that you want to charge him for the wind he uses. What's he going to say? Not a chance. I mean, seriously, what do the skeptics really think when you think about the oil companies and how much power they have? The oil companies can go entire nations into war. They can get into the most powerful, publicly powerful world leaders under their thumbs. Do you really think that you could walk into the office of the chairman of Royal Dutch Shell and say, sorry, your services are no longer required? Do you really think you can do that? Or what's he going to say? Oh, all right, not a problem. We'll adapt our business to this new market. Shell. Well, you still need oil to make candles, don't you? So let's make Shell candles. Yes, that'll be a money spinner. Shell candles. They're pretty colours and nice shapes. They smell really nice. They won't stain your wallpaper. Come on, skeptics. Get your heads out of your bottoms. That's not how the way the world works. Henry Ford. He pioneered an early car company, the Ford Car Company, one of the biggest and most successful car companies in the world, and also one of the oldest. In 1903, he pioneered the world's first mass-produced cars. So for the first time, cars would be made at a price that was cheap enough for ordinary people to buy them. And do you know what? He started off with two models. You've heard about one, the petrol engine. No, he had two. He had two lines going. One producing a petrol engine car, one producing an electric car. And these guys shut down the electric line. They managed to manipulate Henry Ford into stopping the electric car, the electric line. The reason why? They were terrified that he would join forces with Nikola Tesla. If Henry Ford had joined forces with Nikola Tesla to produce the electric car, Tesla would have said, okay, Henry, you make the car, I'll show you how I can generate electricity for it, and people can drive it around for nothing. These guys would never put up with that. And they made sure they didn't. The people in the outer party, some of them fear the changes in the geopolitical order that the the declassification of free energy would achieve. They know that with the current system we have at the moment, where the West, North America, Europe dominates the world, would change. It would be impossible with free energy. And India and China, with their huge populations and their massive resources, would dominate the world. I think that's going to happen anyway, but they don't want that. At the lower level, they don't want that. But at a higher level, it's more subtle than that. It works on many levels, this cover-up. I mean, this is the kind of world we're living in now. It's not just about energy, it's connected, but this is our world, isn't it? Stress, health, sickness, tiredness, headaches, bills, payments, work, debt, late nights, fear, savings, anxiety. This is what we're like. This is what life is like, isn't it? Now, free energy would solve the vast majority of those problems. Because it would stop us fearing things. It would take away fear. It would take away dependency on the state to protect us from things we fear, to give us what we need in terms of sustenance in exchange for our labour. And once you've done that, that would reduce so much stress off people's shoulders. An enormous amount of stress. Most of the stress we suffer from today will be gone. Probably the rest of it will follow over time. And without fear, we may start deciding we don't need these overpaid bureaucrats in Westminster and the White House telling us what to do. And their raison d'etre would be gone, and their reason for existence. For us, they have to make us want them, and if we don't want them anymore, they're gone. Now, I've told you about the outer party. Who's on the inner party? To use the analogy of George Orwell's 1984, the outer party were the people like O'Brien, the bureaucrats in the party that ran everything, but there was an inner party consisting of Big Brother and his direct assistants. This is symbolised by the reverse seal of the United States of America, Novus Ordo Seclorum, New World Order. And the eye in the triangle represents the secret knowledge that exists above the rest of everything else. The rest of the pyramid symbolises everybody else. The elite, the Illuminati, whatever you choose to call them, exist within the eye. The eye also symbolises an occult power, because at the highest level, as more and more witnesses are saying and telling us, at the highest level, these people are Luciferians, they are black magicians. As crazy as that might sound, more and more people are saying that. And there's more and more evidence coming through for that. These are the people who decided they want this new authoritarian world government. I mean, who are they? I mean, there's so many theories going around. Some people say it's simply the highest levels of American business and global capitalists. That's one theory. Another theory is it's the Jews. Now, listen, they're not Jews. Some of them might be Jewish, but I consider that incidental. So if anyone's got any meringue under the table, please don't throw it at me. And also, this is not a bookshop, okay? Of course, that brings up the subject of David Icke and his views that, at the highest level, they are interdimensional beings that look like reptilians, not unlike the reptoid creature that I showed you earlier in this talk, in the first half. Although, I don't think if what David Icke says is true, and I do take it seriously, if possible, there's a case to answer here. This doesn't mean they are connected with the reptoid aliens that people encounter when they're abducted. It doesn't mean they're the same thing. Really, it doesn't matter so much who they are and why they do it. I think what really matters most is what they do and what we have to do in response. So it won't be much longer. This is Stanley Mayer. He's working on his water cell. Stanley Mayer is dead. He was having a meeting with somebody, and he rushed down the street clutching his throat saying, "They've killed me." He was poisoned. Brewster Palmer fell off a train, apparently drunk, while it was moving. Somehow got the door open and fell out, dead. Eugene Maloff is dead. It seems that being a free energy inventor is not only very, very bad for your career prospects, it's very, very hazardous for your life as well. These people keep turning up dead. Just a coincidence, of course. That's what you'll hear. What will happen is if you have a free energy invention, you've got to be very, very careful. Free energy inventors are very often not people who are professional engineers. They often have no scientific training, they often have no formal education. They are, to use a patronising language, which I don't like, they're tinkerers, they tinker. John Hutchison is often labelled as one of these tinkerers because he's not formally trained and he works part-time. This means they're slaving away in their garden shed, in their free time, pissing off their wife because they're not paying her any attention, married to this machine they've got, and they're fiddling with. They're guys who work for almost nothing. What will happen is, if you have a successful free energy invention, you patent it, you go public, you will be approached by some very, very nice guys in grey suits who will make you an offer it'd be very, very hard to refuse. What they will do, they'll often say, you've been working in poverty on a bread line in your free time for so many years. They'll offer you like £10 million if you work with them. This is what JP Morgan and the others did with Tesla. The only thing is you'll have to sign a contract which will mean either you sell the patent to them or you sign away development rights, which means it'll be a great big thick pile of paper which you have to sign. But basically what it means is the moment you sign it, you hand your creation over to them. It'll probably include either selling the patent or a non-disclosure agreement, which means you can never speak about it again. So they'll walk off with your machine, they'll say, we'll get in touch, thank you very much, we'll get back to you, and you'll never see it again. Now, another reason they're keeping quiet about this is because this free energy has been turned into a weapon, a terrible weapon, one worse than anything ever seen. It makes nuclear bombs look like muskets and pikes. And this has been known about since at least 1983 because John Hutchison was visited by a guy called Colonel John Alexander, who is now he's a big star on many UFO circuits, but he visited John Hutchison. John Hutchison has been called by the skeptics a nut job. They called him a fraud. But the US government and the Canadian government were extremely interested in his work. And according to this lady, Dr. Judy Wood, this weapon has been used. It has already been deployed in war. And it was deployed on September 11th, 2001 in New York City, and it was used to demolish the World Trade Center. For more information, please do look up Dr. Judy Wood, her book, Where Did the Towers Go? And Andrew Johnson as well, who's spoken about this. And he's also been a speaker at this event. Now there are some updates. I'm coming on to the end of this speech now, but this is Dr. Judy, part of Dr. Judy Wood's theory, right? That there is a part of the World Trade Center, the central core columns or the external wall columns which support the building. That's 700 feet high, that thing. It should have fallen down and taken out the city block. Instead it just turns to dust in midair. That's an example of what Dr. Judy Wood's discoveries. Now, there is an update on this situation since I last presented this talk. One of those is a video has come to light, a very poor quality video. It's like a video screen over, a camera just pointing at a TV screen. But it appears to show some kind of aircraft being tested by a military research unit in Russia. And it seems to be a hovering platform that can lift into the air without any wings, without any rotors, without any canopy, not using any of the usual methods that an aircraft does. Now, on this video, they can just about make out the soundtrack. The narrator says it's jet powered. It has a turbofan jet engine pointing downwards, literally blowing the thing up into the air. However, you see it flying through a forest and over a meadow, and there's no sign of anything that you get from a jet engine, which would be draft. Jet engines, massive movements of air. So they blow with enormous power air around them, and you get downdraft. There's nothing like this here. So possibly what we're seeing here is a test of a device based on the technology of a very interesting, eccentric guy, which you need more eccentric people these days, called Viktor Davidovich Grebennikov. Now what Grebennikov discovered is very similar to Victor Schauberger. He discovered that animals, creatures in nature, have developed free energy propulsion systems. And one of them is insects. He said that some species of insects use anti-gravity to fly. He says he destroyed this afterwards because he didn't want the military getting their hands on it, which they may well have done, but he says he built a platform which he stuck insect wings to the bottom of it, and he managed to actually levitate this platform with these insect wings. So that's an interesting. I'll let you know if there's any more developments. I've only just discovered this, but this is the film. There's no better quality. This is a still from the film. There's no better quality copy of this. So where do UFOs come into this? It's been a long journey getting there, but we are going to get there now. UFOs are connected with energy politics. Very, very intimately, they are intertwined. And energy politics, I think, is essential to understand for ufology. Now then, for instance, a news story with energy politics, right, is always treated very, very seriously in the news. You hear about the price of oil, about renewable investments and things like that, about the latest fracking shares. It's always treated on the news very, very seriously indeed, isn't it? Now, UFOs are treated very, very differently on the news, aren't they? What's a typical UFO story in the news? What do you think it is? We've seen a few of them. Something like this. This is a typical mainstream news story about UFOs. But what this is really that, in terms of UFOs, we have a situation in which the Twining memo, which actually came out a long, long time ago, not long after Roswell, says that the media should be used to officially deny and ridicule UFOs, is still in force today. But the only difference is, UFOs ridicule and deny UFOs, they ridicule and lie news stories about UFOs. News stories about energy politics, they just lie. Apart from that, there's no difference. Now, how many people have heard of the Roswell incident? Most of you probably. Yeah, it's I think almost everybody has these things. Basically, the Roswell incident was a case in which one of these artifacts came to grief on the Earth's surface. It happened in July of 1947. It came to grief near Roswell, New Mexico, hence the name. And this object was secretly salvaged by the US government. And the reason this is entrenched in free energy is because of what these things are. Did you know that Roswell is not the only one of these events? I mean, Dave, you know about a few more, don't you? There's a few more going around, reports as well of incidents like this. Some of them before Roswell. In fact, the first one on record goes back to 1897, 50 years earlier in Aurora, Texas. There's also an event reported in 1945, I believe, is it Port Girardeau, Missouri, yeah. And also, recently, Richard D. Hall has discovered a case of a similar incident, Gateshead in Tyneside, 1940. The reason is if the governments have salvaged these things, they've investigated them with their top scientists, people like Bob Lazar, they just celebrated the 25th anniversary of his revelation. They're not, these things, if they're travelling from distant galaxies or they're passing through the breaches between this dimension and other dimensions, they're not doing it on Texaco unleaded 4-star. They're doing it on some much, much more sophisticated, sophisticated power, generation and propulsion systems. And so this brings us into the disclosure movement. Disclosure is is a campaign which wants the government to admit, frankly and openly, that an extraterrestrial intelligence has been engaged in the human race. People involved, there's some decent people here. Dr. Stephen Greer, Michael Salla, Stephen Bassett, Paola Harris. These people want to do good things. They want the government to come clean on what they're doing. Now, last year we had the citizens' hearing, which was an enormous success. That's Stephen Bassett there. The citizens' hearing was a mock congressional investigation in which former US Congress members were paid to carry out an equivalent of a US congressional investigation, which is how the US government normally investigates things. What Stephen Bassett is doing now, he sent DVDs of the citizens' hearing to all the members of Congress in the United States, and he wants to have one for real next. He's also going to the United Nations to try and get it done for real there. These are decent people. Stephen Bassett is doing a UK tour now, pretty soon. He's going to appear at the Ex-Politics Leeds conference. Now this has caused a bit of a schism in my mind, because there's a part of me that finds the prospect of willing disclosure so attractive, so appealing. I can't let it go. I want it to be possible. I really, really do. This is why I support these guys. And I've worked with them. I've interviewed this guy on my show. I've interviewed some of the other names I mentioned. But the thing about it is, I think there's a part of me deep down that knows that willing disclosure is not possible. There are little secrets that governments keep. Expensive scandals. Medium-sized secrets, who's Bill Clinton shagging in the Oval Office. Big secrets like Watergate, they can keep those. But these are big secrets the government keeps. But there are some secrets that are bigger than big. There are some secrets which are so big that keeping them is inimitable to the existence of the person keeping them. Which means if they ever divulge what we're talking about here, it will be the end of them. I mean, Obama sitting in front of the camera in the Oval Office going, ladies and gentlemen, UFOs are real. We've known about it for all this time. Well, what are the people watching that going to think? Because that's just one domino on a huge pile which will never be before. They're going to have to admit the Tesla stuff as well. They're going to have to admit the free energy things. We'll never trust them again. I mean, people hardly trust them now, which is good. But it's what is he really going to say? Is Obama really going to say, or David Cameron, is he really going to say, hey, we know UFOs exist and we've known about it for over a century. We kept it from you, not for your benefit, but for ours.
I think what would happen
Sorry.
if somebody like Obama came out and said something like that, the assumption was that we'd just gone nuts and he'd have a nice long holiday.
Well, this is the thing, he won't be able to. So yeah, that's what the first example. But eventually, when it comes out that it's real, I mean, what are the government honestly going to say? They're going to say, sorry, we'll make it up to you. We'll bring back school milk. No, you see, so I think deep down, I know
They're scared.
that this can't happen. I mean, basically, if the ship goes down and we end up in the lifeboat or in the water, we'll have been tricked into it. There's no other. There'll be no other conclusion to make. We'll have to face the fact we've been tricked into it. I don't want to leave you thinking that it's not possible and there's nothing we can do, because I believe that disclosure is happening, but it's going to be something very, very different indeed. It's going to be just one part of a much more fundamental change and revolution in human society and the planet. I think disclosure is going to be us when we break into an empty Area 51. I think that's going to be disclosure, and it'll be part of so much more going on at the time. So, like I say, I want to leave you hopeful today, because some of you might be thinking there's just a handful of us sitting in this room in a city the size of Birmingham, or everyone else is watching TV, or they're at a football match or something. And it is a big decision, it's a big issue to make when you think about what we're faced with. Is this the world we're going to live in the future? Is this what we've got lined up for us? Is this? I don't want to live in that kind of world. Or is this the world we're going to live in? I know which one I choose. I know which one I would want. And you might think we're helpless because we're only a minority, but I don't want you to give up. I want to leave you tonight in hope. I told you this story would have a happy ending, and it does. Now, J.R.R. Tolkien was a very interesting guy because he wrote Lord of the Rings. He was a great novelist, but he also knew stuff big time, if you know what I mean. I can't go into that in detail tonight, but he had access to knowledge that has been kept from the rest of us. He was part of some kind of, he had elite knowledge. And one of his characters, Gandalf, said something very interesting. Some believe it is only great power that can hold evil in check. But that is not what I have found. I have found that it is the small everyday deeds of ordinary folk that keep the darkness at bay. Small acts of kindness and love. Acts which all of us can do. Every single one of us. None of us are helpless. The late great Martin Luther King told us this hour in history needs a dedicated circle of transformed non-conformists. Our planet teeters on the brink of annihilation. Dangerous passions of pride, hatred and selfishness are enthroned in our lives, and men do reverence before false gods of nationalism and materialism. The saving of our world from pending doom will come not through the complacent adjustment of the conforming majority, but through the creative maladjustment of the non-conforming minority. He's talking about us. And also, get mad. So don't get mad, get even. Alright? Don't lose your heads. As Oscar Wilde said, always forgive your enemies because nothing annoys them so much. I take great hope from this guy, Lyle Watson. He's a brilliant scientist because he was open-minded to these sort of things, and he was studying the Jungian collective unconscious, and he discovered when he was studying monkeys that lived on an archipelago of islands off the coast of Australia, that they had access to the Jungian collective unconscious, which is what it is. They used to eat potatoes, which they used to dig up from the ground, these monkeys. One of them one day discovered if you wash the potato in the sea, it'll taste better because it gets salty. He tried. Several other monkeys watched him doing this and thought, I'll have a go at that. And so they went down and tried it, and bit by bit they learned how to wash these potatoes by watching each other, normal way of learning. But what Watson discovered was once a certain proportion of the monkeys knew how to do something, the learning curve had gone like that. Suddenly, the learning curve turned into a learning rocket, and it went like that. And all of them knew how to do it, even those on other islands. What he discovered was that there was a critical mass of knowledge within a population. Once it's reached, that knowledge explodes into the Jungian collective unconscious of all of that species. With monkeys, he found out is about 1%, and that's where you get the phrase, the 100th monkey effect. We don't know what that is with humans because these experiments have never been done on humans. It could be 0.5% or it could be 10%. We don't know, but we could be at that threshold now. This meeting could be the act which pushes us over the threshold into the critical mass, in which case things will change enormously rapidly. And we don't know what that proportion is, I'll say, but it's nowhere near a majority. You don't need a majority of people to be in this room tonight. It may seem like we're just 20 odd people versus 1 million. Doesn't matter. So wouldn't it be ironic if we quit the very moment before we hit that critical mass? If we stepped away the very second before we were about to cross the threshold? The eye in the pyramid, the keepers of the secrets, they've been laughing at us for centuries. Let's not give them that satisfaction. Let's not quit. Let's keep going. Mahatma Gandhi said, another great man who was deceased, he inspired Martin Luther King. When I despair, I remember that all through history, the ways of truth and love have always won. There have been tyrants and murderers, and for a time they can seem invincible. But in the end, they always fall. Think of it. Always. And we are faced with the biggest tyrant of all. The biggest murderers who have ever lived. They're the tyrants and murderers who were behind the tyrants and murderers that Gandhi was talking about. They will fall. I promise you, they will fall. They will fall, and we will win, and we will be free. We will be. Thank you very much. Oh, and Heidi's, on July the 8th, keep your eye on Facebook if you remember the Facebook group, because Heidi is organising an event in London. It's July the 8th is International Disclosure Day, because that was the day of the Roswell news report which debunked the flying saucer story, which is when Stephen Bassett believes the decision was made to bring in the cover-up, the truth embargo, as Bassett calls it. And Heidi is organising an event. We're going to have a protest outside the Science Museum in London, where we're going to be promoting the idea of UFOs and that they are real and that the government knows about it and we need to know about it too. So do come along to Heidi's event if you can.
Thank you, Ben. Have you got time for some...
Yeah, I mean,
how are we doing? 10 past 11, yeah, this is fine, yeah. If any of you got any questions for Ben, I'd be happy to ask.
Anyone got any questions, comments? Sir, yes?
And the hospital portal against the New World Order, is that a real organisation, or is it something that you set as a church to ridicule these people?
Oh, it's something that is real in the sense that it's something I set up, but it's something that really the only member is myself right now. It's not really an organisation as such. It's just what I call the website, really.
So it's not parody that's sticking to things.
Not really, no. It's something I take seriously because I am a hospital porter. I was proud to be a hospital porter. And what's more, there's a guy in America called Jack McLam who had he died last year actually. He had an organisation called Police Against the New World Order. And I thought, if police, thanks for coming. No. If police can have an organisation against the New World Order, why not hospital porters? Hence, the panel was born. Any other questions or comments? That's getting a bit late, isn't it? Yeah.
You know, Stephen Greer,
Yeah.
You're linking up with recruiting people, getting information about the free energy and their ideas.
Yeah.
The two websites that link up, John's doing.
That's right.
Have you got any feelings about it?
Yeah, what the General was saying, just for the people watching at home on Panwo TV, the General's just been saying, is Stephen Greer someone we can trust? When he's been caught out, he's getting involved with the Rockefellers, isn't he, and things like that. Yeah, I mean, I don't think Stephen Greer is someone we can be 100% trustworthy of, and I do urge caution when dealing with him. Andrew Johnson, again, who I've cited tonight, he's spoken more about this. I do urge you to look up Andrew Johnson's work, checktheevidence.com. Dave?
I got one. You showed the graph earlier on with the fall on and everything. Is there any prediction anybody's given as to exactly when that could occur?
No, I mean, the prediction is that at some point we will pass peak oil, and Heinberg claims it's already happened. He claimed it happened about global peak oil happened about 2010.
Right.
Many other countries have peaked before then. In fact, the United States peaked in 1970. But according to Heinberg, what will happen now is there will be either a real or manipulated decline in oil production,
Yes.
which is what's manipulating engineering these vast energy price rises.
Right.
Anybody else like to comment or question? I was getting late, I know. I do go on, don't I, when I want to. Sorry it's been so long. Still recording, yeah. Anybody? Oh, in that case, thank you very much for coming, all of you.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Great.
Excellent.
Really enjoyed that.
And thank you for watching at home, Panwo TV viewers. See ya. Hospital Porters, pride and dignity. Stop the New World Order.
Hello everybody. I've got a slight addendum to give you on the recorded of my live show you've just seen. This is because it's come to my attention since I did that show that somebody on an internet forum has been saying some things about me which are firstly untrue and secondly damaging to my character. This person claims to have written to an organisation called Unite Against Fascism to warn them about me and my live show in Birmingham and how they consider it unsuitable and how they wanted the Unite Against Fascism to take action to stop it from happening. This person, who I'm not going to name for legal reasons because I'm going to come on to that in a minute, has said, I think you have a right to know there will be a live event in Birmingham soon which will feature a speaker of a nature that opposes democratic values and community health. All the evidence is included in this email. His name is Ben Emlyn-Jones and he comes from Oxford. He will be addressing the Birmingham Unidentified Flying Object Group on Thursday the 15th of May this year. The reasons I think you should be alerted are: 1, he is mentally ill. He believes in flying saucers and space aliens, hence his appearance at a UFO group. He is clearly suffering from autism and also some kind of schizotypal delusional disorder. Indeed, he claims to have seen UFOs and ghosts and other fantastical nonsense like that. He has spoken in Birmingham before where he did a 2-hour lecture claiming that zombies are real. I'm not making this up, look, and there's a link to my speech at the Truth Juice Birmingham about zombies, which of course, saying that zombies are real is a complete simplification and misrepresentation of what I actually said in that lecture, as you'll know if I watched it, if you've seen it. Sorry I never warned you about that beforehand. He runs an organisation called Hospital Porters Against the New World Order. He's a big fan of David Icke, who famously believes that the Queen is secretly a lizard monster from outer space. Emlyn-Jones sometimes dresses up like one, and he puts a link to me where I dressed up as an Illuminati reptilian for a fancy dress do. It was something my daughter wanted to do. She thought it'd be amusing. Here we go. He is a 9/11 truther, which means he thinks 9/11 was done by the US government as an inside job. This makes him a fascist crackpot, according to Christopher Hitchens. Well, if they listen to Christopher Hitchens, well, that's their lookout. But I mean, do you think saying that 9/11 was an inside job makes you a fascist crackpot? I don't. 3, he believes the world is controlled by a single secret entity, which he calls the Illuminati or New World Order. He's a raving nutjob firebrand who supports almost every brain-dead conspiracy theory you can think of. The thing is, when he says Illuminati, he really means Jews. Oh dear. This is crazy. He's using code as the dedicated campaigner against hate speech in Canada, Richard Warman, has shown. Emlyn-Jones is actually a Nazi anti-Semite. Am I? Thanks for telling me. I didn't know that. He's a Holocaust denier. Again. I'm not. He was a good friend of the infamous Jew hater Nick Colostrum. He even had Nick Colostrum on his radio show. Denying the Holocaust and supporting Adolf Hitler. Well, that's a load of crap. Firstly, Nick Colostrum is a friend of mine. He's not a Nazi. He's not an anti-Semite. He's not a Jew hater. He's a nice chap. And he's been misrepresented by the media. Yeah, 4. He's a racist piece of white supremacist scum who hates black people and would be in the Ku Klux Klan if he lived in America. This is me, who I actually live with 3 black people, Sudanese black people actually, and this is absurd. And I would never be in the Ku Klux Klan. That's absurd. That is an insult, and I'm going to come on to that. I take this sort of thing very seriously. Look how he wears blackface makeup to mock President Barack Obama, and there's a link to my video on UFO disclosure. I'm not making that video to mock black people or President Obama per se. I'm using it as a satire for the whole disclosure thing. All right. He denies white privilege, which is a common symptom of an undercover racist. He rants against feminism, gay rights, and thinks white straight males are an oppressed minority who should fight for their rights. Right, well, I'm not against gay rights. That's absurd. I support gay rights. I do speak out against feminism and political correctness, and I think that does harm white people, and I think but I'm not saying that white straight males should stand up for their rights as a way of fighting back. I'm saying we should stand up in the awareness that this whole political correctness, feminism thing is an act of psychological warfare against us, all of us, whatever our colour, gender or sexual orientation. That's my point. All right, so I've been misrepresented again and oversimplified again. Why do you think he's a skinhead? Because he is one. So I'm a skinhead. I don't have any hair, so that makes me a sort of skinhead thug who beats up Asians and things like that. Oh God, honestly. He hates 5. He hates Muslims too. Again, wrong. I live with 3 Muslims. And it's probably in the English Defence League. I have never, am not, and would never be in the English Defence League. The English Defence League is a bunch of idiotic, lunatic, bigoted thugs who are playing out their role in this hate Muslims thing, which this setting up Muslims as the bad guys is part of the agenda, all right? And the English Defence League are part of that agenda, and what's more, they're controlled by Mossad. I would never be a member of the English Defence League. This is ridiculous. And he refers to the video I made about Microchip and Muslim Day, which is a satire against that whole setting up Muslims as the evil bad guys we all must hate to justify the New World Order thing. What else? Yeah. Please do everything you can to stop this individual infecting Birmingham with his Nazi, hate-mongering, racist, demented drivel. Well, it's too late. I already have, and nobody complained. No one was there to stop me. Even it was none of those things. But anyway, I have shown you all the evidence in the words from his own lips to prove he really is exactly what I say he is. Thank you. Right. If you watch, as you watched in the video, I actually talk about immigration, and I say that we should not get angry with people from foreign countries who come here, because it's all about the energy politics thing, all right? And if the energy politics problems were solved, they wouldn't be coming here. They're not bad people. They're coming here because they want a better life, and they're doing exactly what you or I would do in that situation. And I even say in the article, in the lecture you've just seen, of course, if you remember, I think I said it anyway, that in the future, when we have free energy, there may very well be a sort of inverted immigration where people who live in cold, wet, European climes like Britain would probably want to move to the Sudan and other places because we get a bit of the sun. And it could be that countries in places like Sudan and Ethiopia and the Middle East and places like that, they're going to have an immigration problem from the likes of you and me, and they're going to have to find ways to keep us out. So, anyway, this person, I'm going to address this person now. I take a very, very dim view of this kind of thing. I will not tolerate being slandered on the internet. And if you don't cease and desist from this now, I'm going to take legal action against you. Do you understand? All right. Anyone who knows me knows that this is a pile of crap, what you've written. And I hope the Unite Against Fascism, if they live up to their name, will not take you seriously. I've already contacted the host of the web of the forum where you posted this material, and I will continue to contact and complain. Anywhere you post this material against me, all right, you cannot go around saying these things about people. It's against the law, and I'm not going to let you do this to me. Do you understand? Good. And as for all the rest of you, thanks for watching. Hospital Porters, pride and dignity, stop the New World Order.